All right, should be good to go. Double checking on sound, and we're live. All right, cool. Everything looks good. All right, guys. So I'm just gonna jump right in tonight. I am without Scott, so I'm doing a new segment here that I'm actually really excited about, and I'm excited to share with you guys. And I'm not expecting too many people in the room, although it does say there are a couple of people hanging out right now, so that's pretty cool. We'll see if that gets any interaction, but I'm just gonna jump right in because yeah, our schedules for me and Scott haven't really been syncing up here lately, but the idea of just keeping videos consistent and sharing what we've been doing here lately is important to me. So just wanted to get on and actually kind of inspires me for our new kind of content show. So this is Live Inc. with David Fleming. That is me. I am here to ink live with you guys. I am here to share some thoughts about being an artist and some of the daily struggles that we as artists basically face as an artist and as a teacher. I'm going to share kind of my knowledge and my insight as to things that I kind of experience on a daily basis that I think a lot of people actually probably want to hear. Tonight's topic is going to be about why do I hate my own art so much. I'm really excited to talk about that. Going to get into that pretty soon, but I am going to kind of like open up a couple other things that I just want to mention and talk about as I get things started here tonight. The first thing I want to talk about is this idea of why live. So you might notice on our channel, we do a lot of random videos. Scott does a lot of really cool, like kind of daily blog post update videos. I really enjoy the format of live. I know our channel is still growing and it doesn't always have tons of people on here kind of in the experience of the open forum, kind of chat back and forth thing. But we do have a couple of people, regulars, one of them being Ronnie, what's up, man, who like to come on and like to experience this kind of thing. And we'd like to grow that and experience it a little bit more. My idea for this segment would be to be able to experience this more with more people watching. So I want to start it as a live segment so that as we grow and as it kind of gets better, it kind of has that look and that kind of feel to it. I'm just really excited because just getting on like this and just kind of hanging out, chilling, just kind of talking as I draw and as I ink is just a really fun thing for me. I love sort of the feeling of I'm in my studio, but so are you. And I don't know, I think it just makes a more comfortable thing. I also love that the Instagram live kind of sets up for a platform that I don't have to edit. I don't have to mess with the program or exporting. I don't have to mess with uploading. When I'm done, it goes onto my channel and it's ready for you guys to view. And I can move on and spend my time doing more art, which is like every artist's dream, right? The biggest hang up for most artists when they do this kind of thing like we do with channels and talks and stuff like this is you spend so much time not just drawing. And as much as I can spend more time drawing and less time editing and having to make things for you guys to hang out with me, the better. So live it is. All right, so another thing I just wanted to mention before I really get into it is that this will not be a Sunday night show. We will keep doing the I'd Rather Be Motivated podcast. This will probably be a Wednesday thing. I am still up for debate whether or not I want to do a Wednesday morning, like an early rise, come hang out with me early in the morning show, or whether or not it might end up being like a more of the afternoon thing, because at my job on a Wednesday, I get a pretty good hour break about midday that I do think might be a perfect time to jump on and hang out with you guys. So keeping that one open. You can leave in the comments or in the chat if you're hanging out, kind of make a comment on which time feels better for people to hang out with an artist. I've seen a lot of artists do the early morning show, and personally for me, I think it's really cool. I've gotten to hang out with some artists that I a lot of times miss their late night shows because I'm an early going to bed person, but an early rise person. So I kind of thought maybe I could grab a couple of you guys, and just like I said, when I'm done, it'll just be posted and it'll be open for you guys to go check out later. So that's going to be basically the point of this segment, is just another chance to hang out and for us to share our knowledge with you, and specifically things that I notice in the daily struggles of artists. And I kind of love that as being a teacher, I see these struggles in young artists. So in my students, especially, I see this a lot. So that's kind of why. So with Inktober just ending as well, this sort of every time you finish a piece of art and then you stare at it and you're like, oh my gosh, what did I make? I thought I was better than that is just a huge struggle for artists to deal with every single day. And every time we decide to sit down and we decide to make. So I was like, what better way to deal with that than to literally do a show, and give people a chance to hear me spit some knowledge and maybe even get a chance to respond to that kind of thing. Yeah, Ronnie, that's so true, man. It's just like I heard on a podcast once with like some professional illustrators talking, and it's like the amount of work you end up doing as a freelance artist and illustrator. It's like you're doing the job of like 6 people. Like normally in a company, you'd have like a dude who does Facebook and a dude who does your marketing and who makes your logos and all that kind of stuff. And I spent half of my day today making a logo that wouldn't post to Instagram for some reason, and I found out because for some reason I started the whole thing in CMYK instead of RGB, and Instagram won't even let you post that. And I was just banging my head against the wall for 2 hours instead of drawing, trying to make logos and things. So that was just a great experience as an artist. So yeah, I just kind of thought I'd first start talking about my own experience, and I would just move into 3 factors that I've kind of identified as the reason why I think most artists struggle with this idea of like, I make art, but then in the end, like, it's like in the journey of making the art, you're so stoked and you're so excited, and you're like, yeah, this is the coolest thing I've ever made. And then as soon as you're finished with it, you're like, womp womp, and you just like look at it and you're like, what was I thinking and why was I so stoked about this kind of thing, right? So in my own experience, I take it as a positive thing, actually. I once talked to an artist at a convention, and we kind of like talked about this for a really long time, actually, and we both came to this like conclusion that it's actually better that you have this attitude towards yourself, like not in any sort of demeaning and like stressful kind of way, which I do think sometimes it sort of ends up translating to that, and that's not good or healthy for you. But there is this feeling of, as long as you are constantly sort of not liking / hating the work that you make, it means that you're setting yourself up to make better work, right? As soon as you start to love everything you make, you kind of actually might be hitting a wall, or might be in a stagnant place in your art. And that is almost worse than just hating everything you always make, because the goal is to continuously grow and get better at this thing that we love to do, right? Like if we all were actually had to be born with it and couldn't get any better, art wouldn't be this beautiful experience that it is of getting to just work for years and years and watch the things that you make get better as you go, right? Can't look back a year ago and say, wow, I'm so glad I've made this kind of progress, then that's also a bad thing. So in my experience, I always view it, no matter how down your art gets you, as a positive thing, because the more you sort of do self-hate your art, the better you're off in terms of, it means you have more to grow. I just started a unit with my drawing students, with my like intro level drawing students, where we do portraits. And I always tell the students, like, we do this really fun activity in the beginning where I just give them 10 minutes and I say, draw as much as you can of a face in 10 minutes. And they always sort of are laughing and being like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And then I give them a bunch of tips. And I'm like, okay, when we draw the face, we look for certain proportions. And I tell them, you're going to mark basically off on these things. Like, you're going to put an X every time I name a good habit and you didn't do it. And you're going to put a check mark if I name a good habit and you actually are already on that good habit. And then I always tell my students, like, whoever put the most check marks is actually in the best place for this unit we're about to start, because the more check marks you put, it means the more opportunities you're going to have to grow and make a better thing, right? Like, if you just already checked off half the boxes that I just listed, your room for growth is like minimal, right? You're gonna get better. You're gonna learn some stuff from this unit, but you don't have so much to hear from you. So that's the positive of all this, right? The more you sort of hate, quote unquote, right, like the work that you make, the better off you are to get better at the thing as you move through your experience, right? So that's my thoughts on that. And I hope you can kind of, like, maybe if you didn't think like that, then like this will be a nice, like, oh wow, yeah, I never really thought, like, I do get better at my art, and that's kind of like something I can think about. So now I'm going to move into the next sort of topic and sort of thing that I always sort of talk to my students about whenever they get in this zone, right? There's like this feeling of, I'm in the middle of it all. I'm drawing, I'm inking, I'm penciling, and you make a beautiful line. You're like, yes, that's it, that's the line. And you're so excited, and then you make another 10 lines that you hate. So then the whole thing sucks. And maybe you get stuck in erase mode. That's a huge thing, right? You just get stuck really drawing, erasing, drawing, erasing, drawing, erasing. That's not satisfying for anybody. So I've identified 3 factors. I call these 3 things your artistic taste, your critical eye, and your ability. So these 3 things, I think, kind of play into sort of your daily, like when you finish a work of art, when you're in the middle of a work of art, and when you are at the end of a work of art, like why you feel sort of the way you do about that work of art. So the first one I'm going to talk about is your critical eye. This one I think is the most important. I think it leads to the most sort of the why you hate your own art and get so self-deprecating about this stuff. And that is our understanding, or like our ability to like conceptualize and kind of comprehend an idea someone tells us, always happens faster than our actual ability, right? So that's, like I said, that's another one of those factors, is your ability, right? How well I can draw a face takes way more time than listening to a video of someone tell you that when you draw a face, you have to follow these certain proportions, right? So you take notes and you're following along and you mean it. You're like, I'm totally gonna take this at face value. I'm gonna understand that I can get better at this. And you're like, cool. And you write down all these awesome proportions and things. And you're like, cool, eyes are one eye apart. That makes so much sense. Then you sit down and you draw and it still doesn't work. And you're like, what the heck? I just listened to this artist talk about this thing. I totally told myself that I believe them and I totally understand this. Like, why doesn't this look better? And then you realize that the eyes still aren't one eye apart and you actually didn't do it very well. But you're in it. It's a struggle and it's like, why is this so hard for me? I don't get this. And it's because of that. It's because your critical eye, which is your understanding of what makes a good piece of art, happens much faster than your ability to make good art. So I just got a comment. I'm going to check it real quick. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's that other thing. So Ronnie makes another good point too. Then you're also, when you're making your own stuff, there's a preciousness to it that it better be the best dang thing that you've ever made, and it's always like easy to get critical on yourself on that as well, because you're like, well, this is like, I'm almost like, this is me. I represent myself in this thing, and that's another huge thing I think for it as well. Right. So the idea here is that you can look at art and understand what makes good art, right? And you can look at your own art and understand that it's not good art, and that weird disconnect gets you frustrated, right? It gets you in the zone. You're like, well, I guess I must just suck at art. Maybe I'm not cut out for this because that guy did it and I couldn't, right? And then there's that huge thing that we forget as artists, and that's that most artists who are awesome at it have been doing it for freaking ever. And you're like, but so have I. And then when you think you're 5 years of doing it forever compared to their like 50 years of doing it forever, you realize there's also a much bigger gap in terms of how much work it really takes to become a master of something, right? That's that 10,000 hours thing that is always talked about, that idea that it takes 10,000 hours to become a master of something, but we always expect to become a master after like 10 hours or something. So the other half of this is how your critical eye is formed is not always on purpose. Like, you're not always like purposefully sort of listening to a video and taking those notes. A lot of times also your critical eye is just literally formed from enjoying and looking at other people's art. And you start to notice trends like subconsciously, that all these different things seem to always make a good work of art, like filling up the page makes good art and things like that, right? So like then you make this sketch of this character, and on your giant canvas you make it tiny and it feels like it's super empty and cavernous and floating. You don't understand why. It's because like in your brain you've like understood this concept of like filling up the space makes a nice composition, but you're still not making that nice composition. So that's kind of that big thing. It's that idea that you become critical of art before you realize you're becoming critical of art. And you're actually critical of other people's, but in a positive way. When you see in other people's work, you see the good and you don't see the bad. You see all those little things where you're like, man, that's so good. Why is he so good at drawing eyes? And you don't notice that he's bad at drawing lips, because when you're like criticizing other people's work, you usually tend to criticize it positively. All right, so this brings me to my next point, which is the idea of taste. And this is this idea that kind of builds off that last one. And that's this thing that art does actually have rules. Like, we always sort of like to tell ourselves that, you know, it's freedom, expression, and creativity. And it is, but it's also the same with music, where jazz is freedom, expression, and creativity. It is also rules. Like, it is also understanding things like proportion and like what we call like the principles and elements of art, which are a big educational thing that you learn. You learn like composition, and it's the idea that like repetition of things makes things more important in a work of art, or line weights and like bold shapes and organic versus geometric and what it does to our brains and things like that, we sort of start to comprehend that same thing too before we actually realize we're comprehending it. And it's this idea that like you become to have a preference of, I love to see art with thick, bold lines and that use these certain trends. And then you have these other things where you're like, but I don't do it myself. And so then you start to form this taste that you don't seem to realize you're not actually doing yourself. And then that's another reason why you look at your own art and you're like, this is dumb, this sucks. Why did I make this? And it's because forever you've been forming this taste in a certain kind of art and you're not actually following through and doing it yourself. And that's a huge thing. Like I struggle with that all the time. This idea that like there's a certain kind of thing that my eye is drawn to, but then when I'm just like building and drawing on my own, a lot of times I sort of forget that thing. And then I make a piece where, I mean, like foundationally, maybe it isn't horrible, but it's like, it doesn't have all these things that my taste has. And my taste is for things that are different and expressive and that are sort of like odd, but still really beautifully done, completely correctly and that kind of stuff. So that's a huge one for me, like not following my tastes is, and then you spend all this time making a piece that you realize isn't even you. Like you only drew it because you were bored and you flipped through Instagram and saw that everybody else was drawing it. So you're like, yeah, I guess I'll jump on this trend here. And that's good, actually. Finding a certain look and a trend that actually fits you is great because it gives you something to always be drawing and stuff. And sometimes we fall into the trap of doing it when it's not our own taste, right? So let's sum this up here because I do feel like I talk fast and I like to sort of repeat myself a lot so people hear everything I have to say. So far, I'm kind of telling you that you have an eye for art, whether or not you realize you have it. So when you sit there and you create and you make, you are criticizing yourself without actually realizing that you are. So when you do that, it makes you kind of like begin the sort of trail of self-hate. Then you have a certain kind of taste. You have a certain kind of art you love. And if you are not staying true to and creating this sort of type of art you love, then you're also doing the same thing to yourself. You have this understanding of a specific type of skill level and you're not trying to build that specific skill level. You're getting stuck drawing these other things that like maybe come more comfortably to you, but you realize you don't actually have taste for them. Like a good example is throughout college and stuff, I did lots of portrait drawing and I do still have to draw faces, but not the way that you just take a picture of your friend or your brother or your sister and you copy every line for line and you make just an exact copy of that thing. I realize that what I love is people who take that and they stretch it and they morph that and they bend that and they ink that and they use different medias and they sort of create something new out of that idea or out of that reference that they had from the beginning, right? So for a long time, I was just like pencil drawing, not realizing that what I really love is expressive, strange characters and comics and stuff like that, because I'd kind of fallen out of my love for comics through college and kind of fell back into it after I got back out of it and realized that it's the thing that started me loving art in the first place. So I forever was sort of fighting my taste. I was sort of creating within comfortability, and what I've been taught is art I should make instead of art that I wanted to make. That's a huge thing. Getting stuck in making art that you don't love, but you're just making because you happen to be kind of already a little bit good at it. Because that last object and that last thing I'm going to talk about here is taste. And that idea, or sorry, taste, ability. The last thing is ability, right? So when I talked about your critical eye, I said that your sort of conceptualization or the concept comes faster than the ability does, right? Like I can sit here and I can tell you how to make good, clean, straight lines, right? Like if you struggle with straight lines, then take a piece of paper, take a pencil, and literally I want you to make a straight line, and I want you to follow through from the arm and not from the wrist, and I want you to make a nice line. And then I want you to try to follow back through that line as many times as you can over and over again without trying to double that line. Right? I want you to just like keep going and making that same exact consistent clean line. Then I want you to make a squiggly line and I want you to try and see if you can follow that. Like we're talking about like line control and stuff like that. And I'm even kind of slipping a little bit here since I'm like talking as I go. And it always kind of makes me slip a little bit. But this idea here, and then I want you to try to make as many lines as you can next to each other without these lines running into each other, right? So there's all these things I can do or I can tell you to do to get better at controlling your pencil, controlling your line. But until you sit down and you do this, you'll be all over the place, and you'll be frustrated and be like, why can't I get this? I was just told that this said you get better at lines, right? So your ability is always, in my mind, 2 steps behind your concept or your kind of understanding of the idea. So then you get super frustrated, and I think this one right here is what leads to it the most, is this idea that you suck at the thing, so you must just be bad at art. Like your art must suck because the concept that you should understand, you don't understand, and you can't actually do it, right? Like if I was good at art, then when someone tells me to make eyes 1 eye apart, I should actually be able to do it. And that's kind of another thing that's just like, well, no, that's not what I'm saying here, right? What I'm saying is that practice making these things 1 eye apart until you can do it, and then you will get better at it, right? So that's the biggest one. That's the one I'm ending the kind of my talk of the show here with, is this idea that you need to actually spend the time, put in the practice for these concepts before you let yourself get frustrated with them. And you're still going to, like I say this, and I still do it myself, maybe you will still do it. But maybe keeping this in mind will help you understand that you get to, or you're allowed to. Like I'm giving you permission to be frustrated with these things because we all do and will get frustrated with them. It is a completely normal thing to understand something way more than your ability to do that thing, right? And then you'll just sit there and you'll hit the wall, and maybe you'll if you're an angry person, I don't know, you'll throw your pencil a couple of times across the room, but it's kind of okay because in the end your ability will catch up, and then you'll be like, cool, I make so much better eyes than I used to make, and then you can move on to the next concept. Because what ends up happening with that is once your ability catches up to one thing, then you realize, oh, wait, I'm actually also bad at lips, but I was so stuck on being bad at eyes and getting frustrated with that, and I hadn't had time to practice that. And then you'll have time to practice all the other things. You'll be like, okay, cool, awesome. So now I've gotten better with my ability at lips. So now I'll get better at my ability of making eyes. And so then that critical eye, that idea that you can understand the concept quicker than you can actually create the concept, will then catch up to itself, and you will find less frustration in your own art. I would say that it probably never goes away. Like I still get in that zone sometimes. And I think what ends up happening is I get in that place I talked about at the beginning of the episode. I get in that safe spot. I get in that spot of like, I actually make a piece where I'm like, hey, this wasn't horrible. So then when I make my next piece and I think that again, I kind of subconsciously realize, wait, if I'm not thinking this is horrible, does that mean I'm not actually improving something right now? Because when you feel completely confident in every aspect of your piece, you're kind of in that stagnant place of like, will I be growing then if I'm not like unsatisfied with this thing? So that's the positive that I just keep bringing up because I want you to take that away from this. If you're listening to this, or if you're listening to this after this goes up, is that the sort of more you hate your own art, the better, because it means you have lots of areas to improve on for the next time that you make a piece. So yeah, that's kind of it. That in a nutshell, that's perfect. It took up like almost exactly the amount of time I was hoping for. I'm gonna keep going for my 30 minutes though that I said I'd be on. So about 7 more minutes, I'll be doing my thing. I think I'm just going to put some music on, some low jams, and finish inking this piece, and then sign out. So I think I still have Ronnie with me. I saw someone else pop in for a second. I don't know if we lost him. But if you guys have any thoughts, feel free to say anything. And if not, just enjoy the ink. I know I do. So I'm happy I got through that. I caught a little bit of a cold this morning, and I tried to sniffle as least as possible. I just realized I just did it, right? But I'm super bad at that. When I've got a cold and I'm trying to talk, I like to that thing a lot. I try and bring in a breath because I don't breathe through my mouth enough, right? That is just like a thing that happens. Thanks a lot, Ronnie. This is page 8 of my current comic that I'm in the middle of doing. So it's actually a really cool, big milestone for me. I have made 3 comics in my life, 2 of them very quick short stories, 5 pages or less. My third one I made was 16 pages long, and I actually printed it and I sold it at convention for a while. I self-printed it. This is my first one that I'm going to go the full length, more than 20 pages, and try to actually get it printed. Not just like print it at my own printer and staple it, but really get a nice book going, get a nice artifact to exist in the world that has my art inside of it. So it's a really exciting thing. I am hoping to have everything ready to roll by February, and Kickstarter will probably be the method that I use to sort of get things rolling. It's called Analog Missions. These sort of robot characters that you see on this page, this just general thing, like when I'm not drawing just fun little like faces and practice things and fan art pieces, the thing that always comes out of my brain is some kind of robotic thing. It's like very human looking, at the same time machinery, very organic machinery thing is my aesthetic that I can follow or tend to fall into if I'm just doing my own thing. I love it though, and I'm going to talk about this I think in a couple of future episodes a little bit more too. But it'll be a good closing thought. I love this new trend in comics and indie comics of like being able to find people who are doing their own thing and not just following sort of an industry standard. It's why I love going to conventions and finding new artists, because you can just make what you are passionate about and you'll find a whole group of people who are into that thing or who also share your passion. I am not. I'm sort of trying to combine my style, which is much more of an illustration style. Like this panel is even a little bit off my usual. This one up here will be really nice and beautiful. This one, just the faces, the whole talking heads thing is not my usual thing. But you got to do what you got to do sometimes for the sake of the story. And I also still found a way to sort of make that thing cool by expanding out of the panel a little bit more. But there'll be lots of open pages, a lot of like big illustrations, and maybe like lots of chunks of writing followed by like talking, like a little bit of like a combination of prose and comic, maybe even whole page breaks that are just like a paragraph with a really beautiful illustration to sort of move the story along or give information. I'm just really excited to be able to like, I do what I want to do with the story because it's mine, and like I've already tested that thing out with some of my other previous books and like talking to some of my fans and stuff about it, and I have a lot of people excited at the idea, so I'm doing it. I'm going to do what I love because I love it. All right, guys, so I've hit that 30-minute mark. That is what I was hoping for with this. Like I said, if you're tuning in later, which you now will be at this time, because this will go up on the channel here after I'm done. The idea behind this thing is I want to spend one more day solo, just me on the channel, sort of hanging out with you guys and sharing what I know. Wednesday mornings or Wednesday afternoons, I'm going to start making this a weekly thing, or just some kind of thought or topic on my mind. I'm going to share it for 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how I feel at the time. And I'm going to ink a page of my analog missions too. It's going to be a place specifically for you to see exclusive things from my comic, because I'm not going to continuously just post them on my Instagram because I want some of them to be a surprise. So it'll be a place for me to ink the stuff, keep myself accountable, and share stuff with you guys as well. So if you haven't already found it or you didn't find it from the other way around, remember that I'dRatherBeDrawing.com is our website. You can read some of those comics I was just talking about from me and from Scott, my partner. And you can check me out at Art of Mr. Fleming on Instagram or Mr. David Fleming on my Facebook. So thanks for watching this. If you made it this far, thanks for tuning in. Ronnie, as always, thank you for being a loyal sort of fan, friend, and follower to us. And we'll catch you guys on the flippity flip. Peace.